Welcome to this video here on the Watch On channel. This is a new video in the series where I list up the 5 things I dislike and the 5 things I like about famous watch brands. If you haven't watched the two earlier editions, the one about Tag Heuer and the one about Omega, you can find them at the end of this video where I will link to them, so you can just click on. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please remember to subscribe if you would like to get a notice when I release new material. I got a lot of content coming up, so well, this video is the newest in the line of videos where I line up 5 things I hate and love about a watch brand. And this time it's of course about Rolex, because this is actually probably one of the most controversial watch brands, watch manufacturers you can come across when you read online forums and discussion boards, especially in the urban gentry Facebook group. A lot of people, it's either love or hate about Rolex. A lot of people just really dislikes Rolex, and I can see the point. There's some things about the watch company which easily could make you dislike this watch company. But on the other side, there's a lot of stuff that really just makes you love Rolex. So of course it's Rolex, and before this video I was just reading up about Rolex in this really nice watch book, The Watch, which lines up the 50 most influential watch brands in the world. You get a short history of how the watch brand got started and the different models. Actually, for this video, I'm not wearing my Rolex. I got a TMT master. I'm actually wearing this Tag Heuer Accurator, and well, it had been, I bought it this summer in Las Vegas, and it had been sitting in my watch box, just been laying around in my watch box for quite some time. I hadn't really been wearing this watch that much, but I put it on this nice I think, what do you call it, canvas strap, which is extremely nice, well done white stitching, and I really think it complements the white dial. So I really fallen back in love with this watch, and I'm dressed up a little bit because I'm going out in a few hours. I'm going out with some friends to celebrate the holidays. I'm officially on Christmas holiday today. So well, let's get into Rolex. And of course, this is my manuscript if you were wondering what I'm looking down at during this video. A lot of you guys know a lot about Rolex, so I won't get deep into the history about this Swiss watchmaker brand, but it was actually established back in 1905 in London by a guy called Hans Willdorf and Alfred Davis. In 1919 they relocated to Geneva in Switzerland, and well, in 1926 they introduced the waterproof oyster case, which they still build on today, and well, the rest is history. So let's start by getting into the 5 worst things, the 5 things I dislike, or many people dislike, or even maybe hate is a strong word, about Rolex. Well, the first one is actually what I would call the greed. Rolex is a very greedy company. And this has become very obvious this year, because they actually made a price hike of about 10% from one day to the other. They just pushed the prices up with 10%. And this is actually something that I really don't think suits a brand like Rolex, a watch company who at the first point charged what I would say quite an overprice for the watches. Rolex make great watches, but they are extremely expensive compared to what you're paying for an Omega or another watch brand, another watch which is quite close to the quality of a Rolex watch. So I think one of the 5 things in no particular order I dislike the most about Rolex is the greed. They are a greedy company, which became obvious this year. It's quite strange to call a commercial company greedy. Their only aim is to make the most revenue, even though Rolex is a family-owned fund and even kind of a charity, and not a company like many other companies established on the stock exchange. They're actually more of a fund, but still I think the aim is to make a lot of money to grow this family fund, and I think they're greedy. I think what they did with the Swiss watch selling crisis we are in the middle of right now, which really took into speed in 2016, they just increased the prices, and I think that is a greedy way to do it. They should probably try to introduce some new models or do something else. Just pushing up the prices by 10% seems greedy to me. That's just my opinion. Maybe you think it's a wise business move. So that was the first thing I really dislike, hate, don't really love Rolex for. The second thing is the extreme secretive way that Rolex functions. You can't really get any insight into Rolex. As a journalist, I'm a journalist actually, not writing about watches or anything. I'm in the commercial part of the media business, but from what I know, it's very hard for reporters, journalists, anybody else to actually get an insight into Rolex. So how is the revenue? How are all the accounts? How do they make their money? What is the profit of Rolex? But even getting into a Rolex factory to see how they make the watches is very, very hard. And they put very, very strict restrictions upon the employees on the Rolex factories. They can't tell anything. And I think it's not really suitable for a company in 2016 to be that secretive. Of course, you don't need to spill all your big innovations and how you develop all your products. Of course, you don't have to do that. You don't have to really make it easy for other companies to copy you. But being so secretive, being the 5th highest ranking luxury brand in the world, which is very impressive. I'm going to get into this point at a later point in this video. I think it's not really suitable for a watch brand or a company like Rolex to be so secretive. They should open up a bit more about the economy in the company, and open up a bit more to get an insight into how they produce the watches. Who are the different people at Rolex? You can't even find out how many watches they produce each year. You have to look at the cost accounts from the Swiss official cost numbers to look at how many watches you think Rolex may be producing, and rumors says it's about 1 million units a year. So I think the secretive part of Rolex is not really a modern way to do it. They should open up a bit more. So to the third point of what I dislike the most about Rolex is actually the lack of innovation. So you may be thinking, is he completely stupid or crazy, that guy in this video? Rolex is known for being one of the most innovative watch companies in the world. They invented a lot of stuff, even back to the oyster case, the waterproof oyster case, a lot about the movements. They invented a lot of stuff. Just to name a few, of course, the waterproof oyster case, the GMT watch, the GMT Master was the first watch which made it possible to track 2 different time zones. The helium escape valve, which they produced, invented with Doxa. They actually invented the helium escape valve with Doxa, the other famous Swiss diving watch company. But still, a lot of the innovation you see with Rolex are old innovations. They're just doing no evolution, no revolution, just a small evolution each year or every 5 or 10 years. They're not really doing anything new. They're not introducing any complicated watches. Actually, the most complicated watch that they have done was released. Is the Sky Dweller, was released in 2012, I think. And that's not really a highly complicated watch. So they're really not inventing anything new. They're just sticking on to what they did 50 or 60 or 100 years ago. And then they're just sticking with that, those inventions, and just perfecting them a little bit. And no problem whatsoever with that. But Rolex is such a fantastic company, such a company with engineers and so much power and monetary power. They should really push the limits of watchmaking. You're seeing other brands like Omega, with the coaxial movement, or you're seeing brands even as Tag Heuer with the most inexpensive tourbillon watch they released last year or the year before, I think. They are actually pushing the limits of what you can do cheaper or better. And Rolex are just not doing anything. They're just putting out the same watches each year, just doing some smaller details a little better, maybe a ceramic bezel for the Submariner. Nothing really big inventions, and I really think they should step up the game. They're just being really conservative. The fourth thing I dislike the most about Rolex is actually not so much. Maybe Rolex does play a part in this with the way they manage the company, the way they present the company, the way they advertise and do partnerships and ambassadors. But I actually think that the fourth thing I hate the most about Rolex is actually what other people associate with the brand, associate to the brand Rolex. So, as I said before, Rolex is the fifth most recognizable luxury brand in the whole world, and this is clothing and whatever. That's quite impressive for a watch company, as watches is, of course, you need to tell the time, but watches are not that important today as compared to maybe 30 or 50 years ago, and that's really impressive that they're number 5. But what other people associate with Rolex, I think it's an amazing achievement that they're so high on the list. But if we look at what other people associate with Rolex, normal people, non-watch people actually associate Rolex with excessive luxury that you don't really need, just being flashy. And a lot of you guys, other Rolex owners, may even have experienced, I heard this a lot, that people would say, is that really a real Rolex, or is it fake? And just the fact that people associate Rolex with being such a luxury brand, such a brand that you use to brag with your life, just to show other people I'm rich, I'm successful, which you don't have to be to buy a Rolex. You could actually just save up the money to get a nice Rolex, which will last you a lifetime, and you can pass on to your son or whatever. That people would automatically assume that you are bragging, that you are an arrogant person, that you're just wearing a Rolex watch to brag. I really hate that fact. And maybe Rolex does play some part in that, but I just really hate it, and that's just too bad for Rolex if they're not really responsible of this. So the fifth reason I really hate Rolex is actually stepping back to the point where I say the fact that they're not really doing a lot of innovation. And what I really dislike the most about Rolex is they don't really push the limits. Do some innovations, do some highly complicated watches. Try to step up the game like a lot of other companies. Even if you look at Seiko with the Grand Seiko, they really stepped up the game, and now they're as good as the best Swiss watches. I think that's quite amazing. If you look at other high-end brands, they're experimenting with materials and stuff like that. Rolex, they don't really do any complicated watches. They don't use any really complicated materials. They're not really stepping up the game. I would like to see a Rolex tourbillon watch, or see a really complicated kind of watch. Whatever they can do, I think they're really lacking the spirit, the energy, the will, the love for watches to really do a complicated watch. I would really like to see Rolex stepping up the game, doing an extremely complicated watch, doing an extremely complicated movement, because they can do it as easy as nothing, but they are just not doing that. So that was the 5 biggest reasons of why I really dislike or hate Rolex. But as much as you may think I hate or dislike Rolex, I actually love Rolex. And that's a hate or love thing. That's probably what Rolex are. And actually one of the points, one of the things I love the most about Rolex is actually the innovation. I hate Rolex for not really doing any new things in recent years, in the last decades, decades. But I really also love what Rolex did. So what they did with the Oyster case, what they did with the GMT watch, what they really did with stepping up, making the most tough, durable, very, very high quality professional movements, I think that is just amazing. So it's not a surprise that the GMT Master is the most famous dual time zone watch in the world. It's not a coincidence that the Submariner is the most recognized diving watch in the world. It's because it's high quality. And very early on, Rolex did the right innovations to make high quality tool watches. Watches that were made to serve a function you couldn't get because you didn't have a smartphone, you didn't have internet or anything like that. So I actually love Rolex for really early on pushing the limits for what you can do with watches, and a lot of companies have since copied that. But I really love Rolex for the innovations, which today are still the way you do a lot of watches, especially with dive watches and dual time zone watches. And next up, of course, the second thing I love the most about Rolex is, of course, the watches. They are just amazing, unique, iconic watches. A lot of the models that Rolex have done are just still today iconic watches and are still selling like crazy, and people are paying extremely high amounts of money to get a Submariner or get a GMT Master or whatever kind of watch that they just. So who doesn't love the Submariner? You don't have to love the design, you don't have to love the watch itself, you don't have to love the bracelet or clasp, but you cannot be a watch enthusiast and not really at some point love what the Submariner represents. A mechanical watch that is highly durable, is highly accurate, and serves a function. It's built to resist water depths. It's built to resist scratches and beating, and it's built to last. The same with the GMT Master. How can you not love what they did with the Pepsi bezel insert, the Coke? How can you not love what they did with the Submariner bezel insert called the Kermit, the green one? How can you not love what they did with the Hulk? They actually did some things and they made icons. They're finding it hard to really push the limits, introducing new icons. What they did with some of the newer models, the Air King and the Oyster Perpetual 39, they're not really bringing anything new. They're just very high quality watches, but they're nothing like the Submariner and the GMT Master and the Datejust, just to name a few. So you just have to love Rolex for the watches, of course. So the third thing I really love about Rolex is the history. I really love the history of Rolex. How they quite early on, over 100 years ago, just started up making tool watches. I love the thing about Rolex made watches that were built for a purpose. And what we really, a lot of us watch lovers, what we really look into buying a watch, we look, of course, into the design. We look into how is the watch built. Is it a good movement? Is it accurate? Is it a tough watch? But we also look into the history of a watch brand. And that is why it's so hard for new micro brands with quite high quality watches to really get a foot into the watch enthusiasts' hearts, because we are really into history. We're into what is proven by time, what is built to last, what is still popular today. And if you look at Rolex, they have one of the most beautiful, rich histories of all watch companies. You really have to look at the top watch brands. They're not the Holy Trilogy with Patek Philippe and Audemars Piguet and Vacheron Constantin, but they're still a company which is loved and respected for their history. And I just love the history which is really built into each and every watch Rolex releases. So big kudos for the history Rolex. The fourth thing I really love about Rolex, which is also a thing I touched about in the video I made about the 7 biggest secrets of Rolex. It's actually they do everything in-house themselves. They don't source anything. They even melt the gold themselves. They produce the metal. They produce every single part, and they manufacture the watches in-house. The movements are in-house. They don't buy any parts in Japan or China or buy some parts from ETA in Switzerland or anything. They do everything themselves. And the rumor has it that it takes, when you go and buy the Rolex watch at the Rolex AD, before it leaves the Rolex factory in Switzerland, 60 different people had their hands on your watch. So that's of course an explanation of why a Rolex watch is very expensive, but it's also a testament to how old school and serious Rolex still does perceive the art of watchmaking. It's still handmade work. They of course have a lot of specially made machines and stuff like that. Of course there's some kind of Fordism in what they do, and of course it's also to some extent an automatized production, but still I love the fact that Rolex does every little bit of the watchmaking process in-house, and they produce every little single detail and part of the watch themselves. And I love the way that they do the quality test. It's very, very rare that you hear about people buying a Rolex watch that is faulty, that doesn't work, that has some kind of problem. It's very, very rare compared to a lot of other comparable brands, from Omega to Seiko and whatever. Well-known brands. Rolex has one of the best quality controls. The pressure testing, the water testing, everything. They test how accurate the watch is. They adjust any little detail before you get the chance to buy the watch at the AD. So I really respect that they do anything themselves, and I respect the high quality, everything themselves, and I respect the very high quality. So the fifth and last point in this video, which is running on, I hope you're still with me and you're still finding it interesting, is actually one of the things I also criticize Rolex for. It's that it's a conservative, a secretive company. It's actually the conservatism with Rolex. They just really don't push the limits. They don't really move. They stick to what they know works. Let's just stay in the past. Let's stay what we invented worked for our movements. What kind of type of steel we use for our stainless steel cases. What we know works with the Submariner. All of that stuff, they really stay conservative. They don't really push the limits. They don't really move that much on. It's all about slow evolution, not revolution. And that is actually also something I really love about Rolex, because you know when you get a Rolex watch, it's proven by time. There's no surprises. The TMT Master, the Datejust, the Submariner, whatever you get of a Rolex watch, it's proven over 50 years or 60 years or even longer, maybe even 90 years. So that is really what I also love about Rolex. They're sticking to what they know work, and that is actually what sometimes I really dislike about other companies, which you will hear me say if you see the videos about Omega and Tag Heuer, the previous videos I did in this kind of 5 things I hate and love about a certain watch brand. They are Omega and Tag Heuer are much more moving with trends and what is modern and what does people want this year and next year. They're really heavily into quartz watches. Rolex were never really that into quartz watches. I think they did one model with a quartz movement, and that was all. And I really respect Rolex for staying on course, moving slow but steadily forward, and not really being a company that is really caught up with what is happening on Facebook or Instagram or anything like that, popular demand or anything. They're sticking to what they know works. So that was my 5 dislikes and likes about Rolex. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have some time left, please leave me a comment, follow me on Instagram, Facebook, write me an email, give me a thumbs up if you liked the video, thumbs down if you didn't. And right now you can see on the screen the 2 other videos I was telling you about. The video about the 5 best and worst things about Tag Heuer, and 5 worst things about Omega. Thank you so much for watching Watch On channel. My name is Anders, and I will see you next time. Bye.